Sup dogs, TheOdie here, and welcome to the second part of the tutorial. For this particular video, we're going to be learning about the basics of events, specifically to use doors, transfer from one map to another map, to create chests, and use keys. But that's not all, we're also going to be learning a little bit about priorities. So it's a handful of things put together, which is why this video is a little bit longer than all the other videos. But trust me, after you watch this one, you'll grab a huge idea of how RPG Maker works, and this is where you're going to really see how the system is actually quite easy to use. So let's get moving along. Before we hop into it, I want to introduce you guys a game I'm currently working on, and it's actually a remake to the 2014 title of the same name. It would be absolutely awesome if you went down in the descriptions, checked out the game page, and check out the Instagram for behind the scene awesomeness. As of this date, I'm currently working on pixel art. It's my first time really getting into it, so there's still a lot for me to learn, as you can probably tell just by looking. But hey, for now I like to think it's pretty decent so far. Alright, with that said, let's hop into today's tutorial. So in the last video, I asked for you guys to create a small room. Here's mine. Not a whole lot going on and not a whole lot to be done. But as we continue the tutorials, we'll start to see more things added on and on. So let's hop back over to the main floor and into our door. Let's double click it to open up the event. So immediately everything's gonna look pretty intimidating, but don't worry, as we progress through this tutorial and the series, we're gonna start to learn more and more of how everything functions. So first of all, I want to name this event. I'll call it door, or upper left room door to be more specific. And when I hit apply, you're gonna notice that it changes over to the left. This is brand new in MZ, and I think this is really cool. It helps list all your events on the map as well as their ID. So let's head over to the contents, and you're going to notice several things. First, you're going to notice that it plays a sound effect, moves the event in a certain way, moves the player in a certain way, play another sound effect, and then transfer the player. The transfer to the player is what we want to edit. Just highlight it and press space to open up the menu. Then we're going to click on this to change where we want to put it. So yours is going to be set to wherever it was before. So what you're going to want to do is click on your new room. Mine was from main floor to small room. And then right where I want the player to enter, which is over here. Now by default, your direction will be retained. It's good practice to change it to where it needs to be, where in my case, it'll be left. You change the fade of it through here. And if you look over here, you're going to see a checkbox that says designate with variables, and I'll show you how that works later on. For now, we'll hit OK and apply. Now, before we actually get this thing going, let's first learn what's going on with this door. So all the contents that we see in here will trigger based on the parameter that's set down here, which in our case is player touch. There are a few others, such as action button, event touch, auto run, and parallel. But for this case, we want player touch. If you guys are curious to learn more about all the different types of triggers, you can actually hold your mouse over it and then see with this helpful box on what everything does. It's a very, very handy tool, and to admit, I like to say that 20% of everything I learned in RPG Maker is due to this helpful box that displays when you hover your mouse over things. Alright, so with that said, let's see what happens exactly with the contents of the door. So first of all, the moment we touch the door, we're going to hear a sound effect. And then the door, apparently, is going to go through a movement, which is turning left, waiting 3 frames, turning right, waiting another 3 frames, and then turning up, and then becoming through. Now that's weird. Why would it do that? Well, if we double click on this to look at the door graphic, you're going to see that the door animates based on what you see here. Now, if we were to click a person, such as this one here, you might not have this resource pack, by the way, but if we look at the characters, let's pick this person, because you're the first person I looked at. You're going to see that he turns left, turns right, and turns up. And well, if we go back to the door, the exact same thing is true. Believe it or not, that's how RPG Maker animates. It turns left, turns right, and turns up. And now it looks like the door is opening. And it was waiting 3 frames in between, because if it doesn't, then it's just going to jump straight from this to this. And that's not going to work out. And the last reason why we want it through is because we want the player to step forward, aka through the door. And then it'll play another sound effect. And then it'll transfer the player. So this is what it looks like when it's all put together. Sweet. There is one thing I want to note though, and I'm going to replay it so you can look very, very carefully. Did you see that? It kind of looks like the door twitches on itself before opening up. And the reason for this is because whenever a player interacts with an event, that event will face the direction of the player. And in this case, the door will face right before it goes through the animation steps. And of course, that's awkward. So to bypass that, we'll want to click Direction Fix, and then go over to the Set Movement route, click on it to highlight, space, and we'll go to the very top, and then turn Direction Fix off. This way the door can still animate. Hit OK, apply, and now when we play it, ta-da! Now it looks a lot more smoother. So now this should give you an idea that we have to do the same for the other room. So let's do that. Right click, quick event creation. We could do door, but in this case, I'm just going to do transfer. And we're going to set it to the main floor, which is perfect right there. Hit OK. And I want the player to face right afterwards, and hit OK. And if we were to open this up, we'll see that it's only a place move sound effect, and then transfer the player. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, based on the creation of my map, you're going to see that this is pretty wrong. But first, let me just name this, and then I'll show you the example. So if I move back, awesome, that works. But let's say I'm coming from down below. And in some cases, yeah, that works out because that's what you want. But let's say we want the player to face this certain direction when they leave. And there are several ways we can do this. One method is that we can double click here, go to Conditional Branch, go into page 3, Character, facing right, hit OK, and then click all this, Control Cut, and then Control Paste, hit Apply, and this will actually tell us that the player has to face right for this event to trigger. And also note that the trigger is on player touch. So this trigger is the moment the player touches the event. Can you imagine that if the player was to walk up, and that's when the player touches the event, and then it's going to run through this content, and then it's going to say, hey, the player is not facing right, the player is facing up. So then it's just going to skip to the end, and nothing will happen. Even though the player is on top of the tile, this trigger is the moment the player touches the event. The moment, not as long as the player is touching the event. So then, nothing will happen, and if you don't believe me, you could give it a try yourself. This is how you're supposed to do it properly. Let's first Control X to cut, Control V to paste this out, delete this because we no longer need it, hit Apply, hit OK, and then we're just going to drag and drop it over. And now let's open it back up. So now that the moment the player touches this event, the player will transfer out. Even if they come from below, they'll just move up to here, and then they'll have to press right to touch the event. However, because of priorities, this box will be considered as below the player, and the player will have to actually be on top of the event to first initially trigger the moment for the player touch. Now, that was a little bit confusing, so I'll say it one more time. Because the priority is below the player, the moment the player touches the event is not until the player is on top of the event. However, if the priority was same as character, then they're in a sense on the same layer and they're bumping into each other. So that moment occurs the moment the player presses right and they're bumping into the wall, aka the invisible event. And so this event will trigger. So I'll show you both examples. And it works. Now I'm going to set it to below. And as you can see, no matter how many times my guy bashes his head against the wall, he cannot escape. How unfortunate. So remember that. It's a very, very neat trick. Same as character, apply. And I'm also going to change the sound effect to make it sound like a door. Jesus Christ, what kind of door is that? And second thought, what kind of door is that? You know what, let's just go to open. That's a lot better. And if I want, I can carry on the sound effect by Control copy, Control paste, and make this sound like the move. And here's a cool feature, is that if we click this, hold the shift and click the top one, it'll highlight all of them. And the same is true if you decide to go to a different line. And we hit Control R or right click, you can see that we can test. And we'll test this moment exactly. Ta-da! And we know that it works out well. Now, don't always depend on this feature. This only works best when the things you're highlighting does not depend on anything else. As you can tell here, this is all independent of other things, and so it works flawlessly. But if it does depend on other things, then you're going to notice some bugs here and there. Alright, now let's OK this out. Cool, so now we know how to transfer between maps. Let's head back to the main floor. And let's now say that in order to enter through this door, the player needs a key. A key. Okay, so I'm going to click here, double click, and we're going to create a chest. And by the way, just like the door, you can also right click and do quick creation, but I'm going to show you how to make this manually. And there's actually an image of a pretty neat chest. Here it is. I like the small one. And we want to start it off by facing down. Remember, it animates left, right, and up. And it does not matter for which of these three that you choose. So I'm going to double click that and hit apply. Now we're going to create our chest animating. Now if I double click the space, the first thing we'll want is for the chest to animate. So let's head on over to page 2 into set movement route. And we want to do the exact same thing as we did for the door. Let's go to this event, turn left, wait a couple of frames, let's choose 3, turn right, same thing, wait 3, and then turn up. And this time we don't want through on, because why would we want the player to walk through or inside of the chest? That makes no sense. So we're just going to keep it as that and hit OK. And now we want to go above this and actually insert a sound effect. Let's move on down to audio and video, play sound effect. And we're going to look for our chests. If we hit C, it'll go all the way to the C's, and we can find chests. Jeez, that sounds... wow. Let's stick with chest 2. Hit OK, apply, and now we need to add the actual item. So let's head on over to page 1, and we're going to see in party, the second one from the top, change item, and you're going to see something called reserved. And of course, we haven't created the item yet, except I already created it before, but we're going to create it together. So I'm going to hit 003. You guys can select 002, and we're going to keep it on increase and keep it on constant and hit OK. Apply, OK out, because now we're going to create the item. If we go over to our database up here, by the way, there's a hotkey for database, and it's F9. You guys will be on actor, but scroll down to where it says items, click that, go over to wherever we created the item, -3, you guys are probably 2, and we'll name it key. And we can create an icon for it. I found that the best looking icon for a key was this green one over here, the second row in the green and fourth column down. Double click. Now we can create a description for the key. A small key. Very descriptive, am I right? So we want to change some parameters and not just hit OK. First of all, let's go down to the item types. We'll want to keep it on regular item, but if you hover your mouse over the item type, it doesn't give us much description. Unfortunately, this help box isn't always helpful. And if we highlight over the items, well, it doesn't give us any specific detail either. So to briefly explain, regular item is your regular inventory. Hidden item A and B are of course hidden to the player, but it is known in the RPG Maker system that the player does have those items. Regular item and key item are just two separate categories, and really there's no main significance unless you're trying to organize your menu for the player. For such a small inventory, I feel like keeping it in just one inventory is totally fine. So I'm going to keep it in regular item, but you guys can change it to key item if you want. Now we head over to the price. This is only if there's a shop. And if it's 0, then that means we can't sell it at all. But of course, our game won't have a shop, so we can ignore that completely. Now this is important. We want to switch the consumables to no. If we have it as yes, then we can actually go into our inventory and interact with the key. And the moment we interact with that key, it will completely disappear and it's a game-breaking bug. So we don't want that at all. We'll see scope, but we can ignore scope because what we want is occasion. And we want to switch this to never. Unless you plan to have a type of game where you actually use the items from your inventory, then you could select menu screen. Otherwise, we want never. You can ignore invocation and damage because this item won't deal any sort of damage from the inventory, nor will we have a battle system. And effects, these are certain things that can heal the player, such as a potion, but of course, we won't have those sort of effects. You can also link it to a common event, but common events are a little bit complicated and won't be until your intermediate steps. So for now, we'll ignore that and hit OK. So hopping back into our chest, we'll now see that our key has been inserted. Awesome! So we're done, right? Except, no, we're not. Because if the player were to interact with this chest, then guess what? They'll constantly gain more and more keys. And man, that's awkward. We want the chest to work once and only once. So how do we do this? There are actually several ways, and we can know all of those ways by looking at the conditions. So we can have a switch that's on. A switch is as it sounds. There's either an on state or an off state. A variable. Variable contains numbers, and you can see that there's a greater than or equal sign. Self switch. Self switch are more private switches to the event and are not seen publicly. Switches and variables are seen publicly, and I'll get to that in a second. Item, if the player holds a certain item. Actor, if there's an actor within the party. So already, I think you guys can have an idea that we want item. Don't worry about the others. I'll show you those as we continue this video. So what we'll want to do is first create a copy of this page and then paste it. And we click here and we hit Ctrl A to select all and delete. We can erase all the contents. Then we'll want to go to item and have it check for the key that we just created. Again, mine is 3, but yours is probably 2. We want to change the image to make it look like it's already been opened. We want the direction to fix so that no matter how the player interacts with this, we will not see it glitching out. And for the rest, we can ignore. Hit apply. That said, let's look back at page 1. And I also noticed that we'll want to have the direction fix on for a similar reason as for the door. So let's edit this, hit space, go back up here, and change direction fix to off. Okay, and apply. So how does RPG Maker work with many pages for an event? Well, RPG Maker will actually check all of the events on the map, and it will check the event's latest page. Then it will check the conditions. If these conditions have been met, then this will be displayed, and anything beneath those pages will not be on the map for when the player plays the game. So we can see here that the content is completely empty, and we can see here the content is to give the player the key. So when we actually hit OK and play the game, move all the way up to our chest, we'll see that we got our key, supposedly, and the chest remains the same. Does not play any more contents for us. Awesome. That reminds me, we probably want to tell the player that they received the key, huh? So let's double click this and go onto the bottommost line. Click that, hit show text, and say, you obtained a key. Or maybe you want to be more first person and say, I got a key. And let's say you do want to be more first person. Well, you can click on this face asset to display the character's face. Hit OK, and we can actually preview that by hitting preview. Cool. And here, over here, where it says name, you can actually type out the name. But if you hold your mouse over here and you allow the help box to display, you can see a whole bunch of code. And I would highly recommend you to look through this. The one that we'll want specifically is the second one, which is \N and then a number. For our case, it'll be 1. And this time, When we hit preview, we're going to notice that the name doesn't display. So let's hit OK, apply, then highlight this, and remember, Control R to test this single line. And we're going to see that the player's name displays. Now, where is it pulling this name, you're wondering? Well, if we go back into our database, back to actors, you're going to see them right here. Raid, that's you. So you can imagine that you can create your own characters by A, editing what's in front of us, or B, changing the maximum and starting from scratch. Me personally, I always love to start from scratch. I don't know why, it's just a me thing. And if you're interested in creating your character now, then by all means feel free, but I won't get into it in this video. So cool, so now we got a treasure chest where the player says, I got a key. Awesome, and you do in fact get the key. And now we want this door to be locked by the key. So how can we do this? Well, we don't want to mess with anything here, because if we mess with anything here, then the door won't display. So what we want to do instead is click here, double click for conditional branch, and we'll want to go over to page 4 where it says item, and we want to check off the key that we created. And we also want something to happen if the player does not have the key, so we'll want to check this box off and hit OK. So now we want to take all this content, remember holding shift and then clicking the bottom line, Control X to cut, going over here, Control V to paste. So now that the player has a key, they'll actually go through the door and it'll be completely fine. But let's say that the player does not have the key. Okay, let's double click, and I want a sound effect to play so that it sounds like the player at least tried the door. Hit O for open. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. Hit OK. And then we'll also tell the player that, I need to find the key. And we could change it to the actor. Awesome. And since we already have the naming scheme going on, we can insert that as well. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to open up the help box. And then on the 5th line where you see \C, you can actually make these texts colored. And colored texts are very, very helpful when you're trying to give hints to the player. So I'm going to add that. And I specifically know that this one's going to be green. You can hit preview to check it out. Cool. Now where are all these colors, you're wondering? Well, if we hit OK and OK again, and we go all the way over to game, open folder, we'll see the game folder. And let's go into image and then system, and then you'll click on window. And everything on this bottom right corner are the colors that you can choose between. This white space here is considered 0, and this blue space here is considered 1. So we got the green one, which is 2, 3. Alright, awesome. So now we made a door. Control R, yes to save. So here I am. I'm gonna test out this door. Oh, barnacles, I need to find the key. Oh, what's this? I got a key! Oh, yeah, it works. So there you guys have it. Now you know a lot more about events. However, the meat and potatoes of this tutorial series will be in the next video, where we learn about switches, variables, and self-switches. To be honest, in the world of RPG Maker horror games, this is the primary thing that you will need to know to really advance your project to where it needs to get started. So it will be a little bit difficult, but I'm certain that you guys will do just fine. Also, I'm currently making a game right now, and if you head over on Instagram, you can actually check out all the behind the scenes. I'd appreciate it so very much if you check those out. It's a great way to see what's possible with the engine and what sort of things you can potentially put into your game. Links will all be down in the descriptions below. Thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to practice, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!